Welcome to Asian American Studies 20A, Introduction to Asian American History. My name is Harvey Dong, and I've been teaching in Asian American and Asian Diaspora Studies program for 25 years. I was also an original founding member of the program, having been a student participant in the 1969 TWLF strike that led to the formation of the first ethnic studies courses in the UC system. I'm an old-timer, you can say, an OG from the old days. This week's lecture is introductory, and so let's start. We're going to be talking about the introduction of the course with themes and guidelines. Syllabus, we're going to update you as far as the dates, the grading format, office hours, assignments. And we're going to deal with the question, what will be our approach to understanding Asian American history? No history, no self. No history, no self is a wonderful theme for both Asian Americans and non-Asian Americans. We all want to know our roots so that we can look to the future with clarity and direction. This theme is very much my personal interest in Asian American history. Knowledge of one's past is relevant to understand the present. In the late 60s and 70s, we knew very little about Asian American history. Asian Americans were not viewed as important to the understanding of America. This can have damaging effects for both Asians and non-Asians alike. Lack of knowledge of one's history can create a false sense of identity. Mistakes of the past become repeated. Scapegoating and stereotyping become the norm. Racial prejudice becomes institutionalized. Master narrative ideologies come into the picture, buttressing white supremacy, racism, sexism, homophobia. The political movements of the 60s and 70s challenged all of this. People of color and white allies wanted change. The Civil Rights Movement, the Third World Liberation Front strikes, and other progressive movements were important in shaping the direction of the world. Asian Americans historically were part of this picture. They were contributors not only to the economy, but in the making of changes to create a better and more just society. With regards to the time frame of the class, we're going to be covering three periods. First, 1848 to 1882, the period of open immigration. In this period, in the beginning, Chinese men created bachelor societies in California and along the West Coast. These immigrants were pushed by necessity, poverty in China, and pulled by attractions, opportunities in the U.S. Not just the push-pull factors alone explain what was happening. Additionally, the world capitalist system was becoming established. A transnational army of labor was recruited, traveling across borders to work in huge entrepreneurial undertakings. The second period, 1882 to 1965, is known as the period of exclusion. This is characterized by exclusionary laws that barred Asian immigrant entry and settlement. Succeeding Asian immigrant groups were also barred using the racial arguments based on the ideas of coolieism, that coolie labor was a threat to white labor. Asians face racism and discrimination in both institutional and social practices, and within this context, they sought to build communities. 1865 to the present is the third period. We're in that now. It's also known as the post-exclusion period. This can be characterized by open immigration that allowed Asian communities to grow dramatically in numbers and ethnic diversity. And in this era, also known as the post-civil rights era, there's unprecedented opportunities for Asian Americans in housing, business, employment, education. Still not fixed. Still lots of racism and nativism, especially during election times. Also, part of the post-exclusion period was the entry of Southeast Asian refugees, which was the result of U.S. military intervention in Southeast Asia. In the post-exclusion period, therefore, we see two Asian Americas, one successful and the other living in poverty. One question that comes up is for the class is to think about which period that you or people that you know have their roots in. Okay. One may ask, what relevance do the earlier periods have on oneself? I would say that there is a legacy of institutionalized racism that carries over to Asian Americans today, or about Asian Americans today. There is also a legacy of resistance that we can all seek and learn from the earlier periods. International relations between Asian countries and the United States affect Asian American lives. During World War II, a war involving the United States and Japan, huge setbacks for Japanese Americans, with some opportunities for other Asian Americans. During the 1950s, the Cold War between the U.S. and China, this led to harsh treatment against Chinese in the United States. During the trade war with Japan, in the United States, Japan was viewed as an economic threat to the economic stability of the United States. This led to violence and hate crimes against those perceived to be Japanese, including the murder of Vincent Chin, a Chinese American. In the present times, with conflicts between the U.S. and China, we see a continuation of past racism and stereotyping. Today, 1/3 of Asian Americans feel that they could be the victim of a hate crime. The photograph on the left, a 1942 photo of a Japanese American family waiting on a designated street corner in Hayward, California. They're all wearing numbered tags, which was required, and luggage, awaiting government transport to concentration camps. For what purpose? Because all Japanese persons were deemed enemy aliens. Deep roots have been established. We will be covering a 174-year history. Asian American history is a diverse history, diverse with regards to nativity, countries of origin, ethnicity, class, and reasons for migration. It's a complex history, and by the end of the class, we should have the grounding to create further foundational understanding. We'll be able to use history to understand the present. The photo on the left is an anti-deportation rally led by Southeast Asian community organizations. Although the Asian exclusion laws have been repealed during World War II, new forms are continuing today. Read through the course description in our course syllabus and think through about some of the terms covered within it. This introductory course examines critical aspects of Asian American history. The main course objective is to provide students with a historical framework for basic understanding of the experiences of the major Asian American groups and a foundation for comparative analysis. In so doing, the course will analyze how national and international factors have impacted migration and migration-related policies, influenced race, class, and gender relations, became linked with interclass conflicts between capital and labor, and connected to intraclass conflicts between workers of different nationalities. Finally, the course will look at the Asian American experience from the viewpoint of agency and resistance, what was done by the Asian American population themselves to answer the challenges faced. The theme of agency and resistance will also study various historical entry points of support by other Americans towards Asian Americans. The syllabus description covers a lot of ground. Historical frameworks deals with structure and ideology. The comparative analysis deals with strategies of the different entering groups used to avoid the pitfalls of the previous entering groups. The relationship between national and international, or local, global, affects both migration and treatment of Asian Americans. Agency and resistance involves the making of histories. Resistance changes the narratives. New solidarities are then created. The photograph on the right is labor leader Cesar Chavez with Filipino activist and labor leader Larry Idleong, both leaders of the United Farm Workers Association. Their solidarity had tremendous impact with regards to labor relations and also the role of Asian Americans in the labor movement. There are also 4 learning goals for our class. This has to do with taking learning as a process. The first goal is to identify major historical events, persons, and ideas that have shaped Asian American history. 2, to develop critical writing and thinking skills supported by historical evidence. 3, to communicate and work effectively in group projects and presentations. 4, to apply historical method to analyze and compare the relationship between the past and the contemporary. Professor Ronald Takaki, author of the textbook Strangers from a Different Shore, taught the first African American Studies class at UCLA in the early 1970s, and later he came to UC Berkeley to develop Asian American and ethnic studies. In his classes, he always emphasized the need to relearn, to reevaluate our biases and assumptions, to unbrainwash ourselves. We need to take an epistemological approach to understanding the world. Epistemology refers to the theory of knowledge, what makes justified beliefs justified, why do we have a certain way of looking at the world, where a certain order is established. So Takaki writes, epistemology is a critical thinking skill. Epistemology asks the question, how do you know what you know? In other words, the how of knowing may be more important than the what. How you know something may determine what you know about it. In this slide, the photo on the left, not from our class, but that of 1960s Manhattan Chinatown school children who were saluting the American flag at the beginning of the day. 0 Asian American Studies classes was taught. Asian American history was erased and not taught, and one could imagine the negative ramifications on the students when that happened. Lectures will be meeting on Mondays, 3 to 6, room 105, North Gate. Discussion sections, there's no discussion section this first week. Note the time and location changes, though, especially for sections 102, which meets Thursday, 4 to 5 in Donnell 250. Yes, Asian American history is American history. With regards to course requirements and grading, discussion section will be 30% of your grade. Included will be presentations, quizzes, discussion board entries, and participation in class. You need to show up in class. See the B course assignment announcements with regards to turning in your assignments on time. And also make sure that you follow the due dates. No late assignments. The midterm is identifications and essay, which is 15%. There's an 8-page term paper, which is worth 30%, and it's a comparative oral history project. The final exam will be worth 25%, which includes identifications and essays. And then there's a field trip component here for extra credit. You pick field trips from an approved list, and that can boost your grade by 4%. There are 4 required texts. The required texts include Strangers from a Different Shore, A History of Asian Americans by Ronald Takaki, The Forbidden Book, The Philippine-American War in Political Cartoons by Abe Ignacio, Enrique de la Cruz, Jorge Manuel, and Helen Toribio, Asian American Histories of the United States by Catherine Sanisa Choi, and Prisoners Without Trial by Japanese Americans in World War II by Roger Daniels. All these books will be available at Eastwind Books of Berkeley, online, www.asiabookcenter.com. This April 2023, Eastwind Books of Berkeley will close its doors and remain as an online business to focus more on publishing and distribution of Asian American and ethnic studies literature. So make sure that you start pulling your textbooks together and start doing the readings. And next will be our first assignment. So you can say that Asian American history is truly a relevant course. With the materials that we're going to cover, we want to be able to develop an epistemological critical thinking approach to history so that we too can become makers of history. Review the course themes and guidelines. There's a discussion board assignment due on B courses this Friday. And the big question of this week is there any relevance to the studying of Asian American history? What do we want to get out of this class? I wrote an essay on this topic, why we need Asian American studies. There's a link to it for you to go over, read through that essay, and read through the preface in Strangers from a Different Shore, and also the preface in Asian American Histories. Okay, so I'll see you next week, and have a good rest of the week.